Hailing from Caledor is the Dragon Prince Imrik. Famed for having a brutal early game, Imrik must survive a start that would obliterate many weaker factions as he scours the Darklands for legendary dragons to recruit into his ranks, ending up with one of the most potent late game armies in the entire game. Welcome to Elven Plot Armor, and this is the faction mastery and rating for the Knights of Caledor. To rate the faction, we'll be assessing them against 5 key criteria, awarding them a 5-star rating, culminating in a total score. This guide is made in tandem with community feedback and playtesting to provide a balanced perspective. Starting off with strategy, which is the faction's ability to control and manipulate the campaign map. Saying the Knights of Caledor are a weak High Elf faction is like calling someone only the world's 5th richest man. There may be an element of comparative truth, but nobody is feeling sorry for them. Imrik begins the furthest from home in the far eastern Darklands, hunting for dragons to add to his ranks. The biggest setback of this position is having no ocean, essentially denying him the signature High Elf trade, depriving him of income as a means to support his armies against many hostile threats. The result is Imrik relying on a single army which must over-deliver as he acquires the 5 legendary dragons, which will increasingly buff his power to overcome the odds. These dragons are acquired through the Knights of Caledor dragon encounter ability, and I've already made an entire video dedicated to this which will explain how to defeat every dragon, the best order, and I recommend checking it out after this one. But essentially, starting turn 11 you can interact with dragons on the map, and you should always opt to challenge the dragon, save for maybe the first time where taking the influence might help you acquire strong nobles, which I do recommend. Also, once you've acquired your 5th and final dragon quest, you can use this as a means of obtaining influence, where it basically becomes a watered down version of Tyrion's court dilemmas. The dragons are raised on the campaign map as any regiment of renown, so the ability to instant raise these monsters is very strong, but Imrik has been very heavily nerfed. Originally there was no cooldown between this, and you could go from turn to turn catapulting these dragons around the map. Now he's subject to the same 10 turn cooldown, which is standard, so no more teleporting dragons. Regardless, Imrik is likely to have all 5 dragons between turn 75 and maybe 110 at latest. But just remember, you don't need to do the dragon battles immediately. You can even store all 5 quests up in a row. It doesn't matter, just make sure you do it safely and give your army a chance to recover. We're going to leave the dragon encounter mechanic there, but I do recommend the subsequent video, and that'll help you blitz all the dragons by turn 80 quite comfortably. As for faction-wide bonuses, the Knights of Caledor get reduced recruitment on dragons and dragon princes, which is useful to raise a dragon stack late game, but it doesn't really help them with the dicey early game. As for the faction leader and their contribution towards the strategy score, Imrik does give a negative 25% discount to these same units in his army, which is honestly excellent because he needs all the economic help he can get, and cost reduction is his best means of achieving this. Imrik is also immune to mountain and desert attrition, which is actually better than it sounds, and with an additional 15% movement, this is great for traversing the large barren Darklands, but you'll still feel very slow and outpaced by the Greenskin and Skaven. In theme with Imrik's pretentious personality, his pompous friendship circle makes him the High Elf Lord specialised in nobles, and arguably Imrik's greatest ability is the level 12 Caledor Incumbent, allowing 3 extra nobles which can be recruited anywhere. Nobles are such a key part of the Knights of Caledor, I need to address them here in some length. Now, there's a wildly exaggerated need to farm all the influence you possibly can, and this is because this is the means of unlocking the most cheesy hero traits. While this is powerful, it is honestly largely unnecessary, and Imrik will not have the funds to spend on multiple heroes stealing multiple lots of influence. By level 12, Imrik will have access to 4 nobles. Send 2 of them out to go scout and steal influence, but the other 2 I would recommend embedding in Imrik's army. Each noble can increase replenishment by 15%, and yes, this does stack. Maximise melee defense, armor, and anything that will improve staying power. They provide a great answer for enemy heroes, as well as blowing up infantry for your archers and fire attacks to destroy. Keeping your nobles on foot provides an invaluable source of protection for your basic archers, which you will need to rely on for much longer than any other lord. I would only recommend putting your nobles on a chariot or an eagle if you're going to verse someone with an artillery advantage, i.e. the Empire or Dwarves, but what are you doing fighting them as Imrik? While it's good to always have one experienced noble that can replenish your army with Imrik, I would definitely recommend disbanding old nobles which have poor traits for good ones. For nobles scouting and collecting influence, conscientious and emollient are great ways to bolster your empire, and for nobles embedded with Imrik you cannot go past prudent or frugal. Imrik will always have expensive units in his army, so reducing this cost is one of the best ways of improving your economy. When leveling up Imrik, the order of his skills really becomes apparent when you consider his needs. First, get 3 points in Wary to protect yourself from Skaven ambushes, and then unlock Lightning Strike as a first priority. Next up, we need to deal with our lack of trade, not by making money, but again, reducing costs. So 3 points in Quartermaster. Whilst this isn't the right investment for every lord, Imrik will always have expensive units, meaning this is a short-term lifesaver and a long-term stack saver. Then get Feared and Renowned for more reduction, as well as some extra movement, which is king in this campaign. But immediately at level 12, get Caledor Incumbent for the aforementioned noble goodness, followed by Vor's Armament and Dragonheart to buff your army's line holders. The dragon buff is excellent, and unless you're a very heavy cavalry user or running a themed army, the cavalry buff can honestly be missed. The moment Imrik hits level 14, put him on Manathnia, get Ashen Fields, Blazing Lance, and Dragon Pact for more fire potency. And here's where the automatic logic ends and some player discretion really starts to set in. Normally the red tree would be calling you here, but for now, I say ignore it. Buff melee attack and defense to unlock Lord of Dragons. Now this is your Dragon Slayer. Imrik gets buffs after defeating every dragon, but he doesn't actually really need these. This is the source that will help him out-duel anything. Even if you don't advance further down this tree, before or after the red skills, make sure you get this. Speaking of the red tree, you'll be relying on basic archers for a depressingly long time, and they are likely to reach rank 9, and they'll be your loyal heavy hitters, so 3 points in Bowmaster and then 3 points in Skymaster to boost your dragons. Now from here you can either continue along this tree to boost your archers and dragons more, you can go further down the melee tree and unlock Heroic Killing Blow, but I tend to find this to be overkill and personally give preference towards boosting archers and dragons as well as Imrik's Defensibility. In terms of rites, the Knights of Caledor get the stock standard Invocation of Isha and Assyrian to help you deal with corruption and settling your provinces. Their unique rite is the Invocation of Eldrazi, which helps power level Imrik and his nobles like nothing else. Seriously, watch Imrik fly up the levels, getting him onto his dragon in record time. This is absolutely key and can really help his nobles assist him on the front line by buffing their stats so soon. Further to this, the Knights of Caledor also get an improved Invocation of Vol, giving another +3 dragon attacks, as well as the typical siege attacker ability, which really doesn't matter because he starts with a Sun Dragon, but 3 dragon breaths, that's as good as it sounds. Overall, Imrik's campaign mechanics are really fun, but they actually do very little to deliver him from his dicey initial challenge. When worded like this, it sounds crippling, but the faction gets excellent rites, allowing Imrik and his nobles to be power leveled and mounted on his dragon as soon as possible. Once he advances away from the marshlands, Imrik's improved movement really works in tandem with having so many nobles, being able to scout, steal influence, as well as replenish and give his army line holders. The Knights of Caledor double down on a few very strong skills and they land 4 stars for strategy. Next we have Geograhy, which is the defensibility and navigation of the surrounds. Well, it's safe to say Imrik wasn't listening in Geograhy class because he's surrounded by enemies in their own backyard and must slowly walk around swamps and mountains whilst his foes effortlessly go under. Imrik's best plan is typically just to charge straight for the jugular and beeline for the enemy capitals to reduce their recruitment power, as often holding the midfield isn't your advantage to play. Always take the Darkhold turn 1 and immediately venture to the east. Not taking Snickchat early is one of the most painful games of Rat and Elf you can possibly have, and it's the first major hurdle to overcome once Clan Eshin are destroyed. Not only does this vanquish Snitch, but also you'll have Flayed Rock. See my guide on how to eliminate him and get this by turn 7. Whilst this province of Nobler County is defensible, it's very lackluster for a 4 settlement province, but it's actually one you could hold, so you'll have to take it. From here you'll want to complete your initial settlement as well as remove Malice Darkblade from the Dragon Isles. Once you've completed the Dragon Isles, wall up the southern island, and that is as south as you need to go. Put walls up on Ashridge Mountain and you finally have a defensible front that you can fortify. From here on, it's now all about venturing to the west and establishing that trade route. This is best achieved by taking Crookback Mountain, as well as other capitals such as Black Crag and Carrick 8 Peaks, taking the minor settlements and walling them up along the way till you reach the Western Badlands and ultimately that final trade port destination. Just never forget to scout with your heroes because you're still outmaneuvered. The good news is that you only need one port, the obvious ones being Barak Var, Stone Mine Tower, and Gronti Mingol. The bad news is that you need to have consecutive territory stringing all the way from your capital to one of these areas. So if you do ally with the Dowie, make sure they don't take any of the territories that might cut this path off, because the choice between war with the dwarves and a trade path is a lousy one you don't want to have to make. I'll quickly add here that upon defeating a 6th settlement, Imrik will have the option to confederate back into Ulthuan into his home of Caledor. Note that 2 actions on the same settlement count as 2 occurrences, so if you sack and then occupy, this counts as 2, but I would not rush this because you're still poor. Let Caledor spend the money to level up these provinces for you. Once you have a foothold in Ulthuan, send a noble straight to Avalon and confederate them as soon as possible so you can bring Alarielle down to the south and use her amazing Power of Nature ability to skyrocket your development. A hot tip here is to immediately let Avalon's provinces fall to rebellion. These rebellions will be High Elves and they'll help fight the Dark Elves that invade. Peace out with them later and then just confederate them back into your empire when you're ready. Make sure this rebellion spawns quickly because Morathi's Chaos Corruption can mean a Chaos stack will rise and they will just raise the settlement to the ground. You typically don't want to confederate too much in Ulthuan too quickly because it's just another front that you can't afford. However, Eltharion and Idres are a great target. Located on the safe eastern side of the island away from the conflict, this is a province that you can defend and is worth investing in economically, and you can safely send the odd stack or two to assist if you think the Dark Elves are getting too far ahead. I'm going to quickly debunk the myth that Imrik is better off abandoning his southern holdings in favour of returning to Ulthuan. Well, yes, this does relocate the capital, which allows for trade. The bad news is this isn't just an incredible waste of the valuable early turns in the game, but it also leaves you a sitting duck with no army and low balance of power in one of the most vulnerable parts of the island in Caledor, which I'll also add is a very average 2-settlement province on the most hostile area of the island. And trust me, you won't make any more friends here when your balance of power has been thrown away from disbanding all of your army. Moreover, in the current version of the game, Tyrion has a massive diplomatic penalty against Imrik, so there isn't a reliable early confederation strategy which doesn't hurt your campaign. So again, building an empire in the south and uniting them later in the campaign is by far the strongest outcome. If you're absolutely set on abandoning the southern holdings, you can still have a good campaign, but it's just nowhere near as strong. And if you'd like to use Imrik in Ulthuan, it's actually much quicker and stronger to play as Etain and follow my 7-turn guide to bring him up there. Overall, Imrik is pretty much the quintessential fish out of water campaign, and any good holdings that might have 4 provinces tend to either come with strings attached or just don't offer very much value. The Knights of Caledor get 2¼ stars for Geography. Next we have the Diplomacy rating, which measures how hostile the start is, offset by friendly opportunities, and the faction's ability to control those threats and engagements. Imrik's starting threats essentially dictate his early game. You'll need to take out Snikch first, and then at least take Ashridge Mountain to make peace with the Helheim Dwarves. But from then, you have to wipe out Malice Darkblade, so the first 20 turns don't really allow for much creativity. After this point, you can start to make friends and trade, such as the Tomb Kings to your south who can occupy these otherwise undesirable territories which you would never want to take. Try to avoid ever going further south than the Dragon Isles because Kroq-Gar can just declare war on you, and it's honestly worth a few gifts and influence to keep him happy if he's making you uneasy. The biggest threat is definitely the Greenskins, as they can confederate very quickly, so you want to get the dwarves on side as soon as possible, not just for trade but because if they get wiped, your battle against the Greenskins will be all the more difficult. As for confederations, after Caledor, Alarielle is an absolute must. Use that Power of Nature ability and let your southern kingdom thrive. Even paying for a supply line to have her wandering around using this is honestly worth it, it's that good. After this confederated res, From here you can continue trying to confederate, but I honestly almost advise against it now that the Dark Elves are so aggressive. Not only is this costly in in-game currency, it's also very time consuming in real life to have to battle the Dark Elves as well as manage your southern provinces. Holding Everest is okay with only 2 entryways, however the rest of Ulthuan you're better off just letting the AI fight them back and just allow Tyrion and Ulthuan to hold them off until chaos come and then typically wreck the Dark Elves. At this point the High Elves typically start getting the momentum back and they'll push the Dark Elves off Ulthuan. This is a great time to finally confederate them. Let them do the hard work and then take their holdings. As previously mentioned, Tyrion is very resistant against confederating with the Knights of Caledor, so a reliable confederation is more likely to be later than early, meaning this is a more consistent and dependable strategy. But if Tyrion is in serious trouble and vulnerable and available to confederate, absolutely get him and do not let him die, although you can resurrect him. Last of all, don't declare war on the Cult of Pleasure. There's a really good chance that even though there's no army on Ulthuan, the fact you own a dragon and dragon princes really bolsters your balance of power and makes Morathi quite adverse to wanting to attack you, given she'll already be at war with several other High Elf factions. So by not venturing north, there's actually a great chance that she will just ignore you and let Caledor sit in peace. Imrik starts in a very unpopular position with multiple threats. However, he still has the influence mechanic as well as very dependable confederations, which gives him 3¼ stars in diplomacy. Next up we have military, which assesses the faction's ability to win its engagements and be effective on the battlefield. Imrik begins the game with one of the strongest starting armies. It's flexible, has a sun dragon with breath attacks and siege attackers, and having so many nobles to scout and provide replenishment makes his army incredibly resilient. The level of control the Knights of Caledor gain once they obtain all 5 dragons, well, we're summoning 5 dragons out of thin air. I'm not going to go into how strong this is. The only issue is surviving long enough to get them. Fortunately for them, the early game High Elf units are very good. Basic spearmen and archers working in tandem with noble line holders will do a great job, not just because of Imrik, but because of the true MVP of his campaign, Michaela, his Fire Mage. Give your Fire Mage 3 points in Burning Head, Kindle Flame for extra power, get her on a horse at level 7 and she will dart around and absolutely wreck the competition. Level 22, she gets the dragon mount, and now we are talking. Just be aware that she's still a hero and doesn't receive the dragon oriented buffs because she's a hero on a mount, not an actual dragon. Using ambush stance effectively is very key for the Knights of Caledor, and keep in mind that constant use of the stance will give you the ambusher trait, bolstering success and defense by 5% and 10% respectively. Imrik is quite likely to reach tier 4 a bit later than his contemporaries, so if you come across a tier 3 barracks, consider hiring a couple of silver and guard to replace your spears, which will keep your archers more relevant for longer. Paired with Imrik and a Fire Mage, this discount army can perform so well, you might even consider keeping these basic units in favour of investing in a more powerful secondary army. If you brought Alariel down, then invest in Sisters of Avalon for her, and the combination of these 2 armies will have more bite to put down most things that can threaten you. When the time comes, yes, you can absolutely drag and stack with Imrik. Feel free to throw in a Lawmaster to keep them alive, but only do this once your economy can sustain you, because quite obviously 2 very strong armies can cover a lot more ground than 1 overly excessively strong army, but when you can afford it, have fun. Imrik must overcome several hurdles in his campaign. However, having very strong military is his means of overcoming these, and he gets 4¾ stars for military. Finally, we have the economy rating, which is the faction's ability to generate wealth, cover costs, and expand the empire. And needless to say, this is probably another class that Imrik skipped. Being unable to utilize that High Elf trade means your empire effectively is a glorified sweatshop full of trinket makers. The knock-on effect for depending on buildings for income means that you forego growth and reaching the lucrative tier 4 later. He also has some unique buildings in his starting province, but these only partially mitigate the losses he has from not being able to trade. It's just slightly depressing when Imrik's earliest moneymaker is the Dragon Isles, which is stunted by having unsuitable climate. Your fortunes will really start to turn around when you start to seize the larger holdings as you move west, seizing gold as well as other resources that you can trade with the Dowie and Tomb Kings should you make contact with them. Because Imrik is a poor man with expensive taste, the best way to make money with him is actually by not spending money, by reducing his costs via Quartermaster, Feared and Renown, and adding nobles in his army with the Prudent and Frugal trait, which reduce upkeep by 5 and 15% respectively. In Ulthuan, confederating Everest does actually provide a great province for you to generate generate some income. Not just because it has resources, but it is defensible and you can invest without the worry of Morathi coming in and smashing it, unlike the unstable western side where Morathi is likely to first strike. But overall, Imrik's economy is one of the biggest vices of his campaign, and it really inhibits him from using multiple armies to cover his multiple problems, and he gets 2.5 stars for economy. Overall, the Knights of Caledor are my personal favourite faction, including a very fun and interesting role-playing element to their campaign. What this faction lacks in the number of available options, it makes up for by having strength in those options, having nobles to scout and boost Imrik's replenishment and front lines, and being able to get access to the best units in the game, such as dragons and the Fire Mage, from the get-go. The Knights of Caledor starting conditions would absolutely cripple many other factions, and the fact they were able to not only survive but thrive shows that Imrik is the Lord of Dragons. Even in the worst conditions, the Knights of Caledor score 67%. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If this has been useful or entertaining, please consider giving the channel a like or subscribe. I really appreciate it. Any questions, ask away. I answer everything, and if you're planning on playing Imrik, I highly recommend my Dragon Mastery Guide as well as Imrik's Dragon Encounter Guide video. This is Elven Plot Armor, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.